Recording started. Everyone get your songs in. Good 30 already, which is great. Lovely. Right, welcome everyone. This is our last webinar of the 25-26 season, which has flown around very fast, coming to the end of the season. So looking at specifically around end of season renovations, recognise loads of names in people in registry who've signed up in the attendee list so far. So a lot of you have been on these calls today, but just as a reminder, and sort of for those who haven't been on these are really informal. We keep them try and work them around sort of what you guys want and go off feedback. It is set up as a webinar, so you won't be able to sort of mute yourself or take your camera off, but we have got the Q&A and the chat function. Loads of different county FA officers alongside myself who will look to answer anything throughout the presentation that Chris from the GMA is going to do alongside some guest speakers. Like I say, this one is around end of season renovations, which Chris will go into shortly. But please do throw in any questions that you have throughout. We'll have chance near the end as well for any specifics, but we will try to answer bits throughout as well. It is being recorded, so don't worry about sort of taking notes or anything like that. We will share this after alongside with the slide deck. It will be uploaded to YouTube for you to access and share with other members of your clubs and your organisations as well. But without further ado, I'll introduce Chris, which I think majority of people will know, but I'm sure they'll do a little intro anyway.
Cheers, Leon. Thank you. So my name's Chris Hunter. For those who don't know me, I am a regional pitch advisor for the North East and Yorkshire. Thank you very much for joining this webinar. So as Leon pointed out, we're going to focus, as you can see on the slide deck, which I hope you can see. Can somebody just give me a thumbs up? Phil, Rich, can you see that? Excellent stuff. Good. So I've actually brought the sunshine with me today on my travels. I've seen some glimmers of sun, which has been lovely to see, which is the first time I've seen them for a while, which it was quite cold still, so it can be a little bit deceiving at times when you go outside and you think it's eventually spring is here, but it's getting there, which is good to see. So just a little bit about me. I'm going to ask the guys to introduce themselves. So as I said, I'm pitch advisor for the North East and for Yorkshire. I've got 20 years experience in the industry, in the sector. I've worked across football, golf, rugby league, and I've got a range of qualifications. So my background is really practically on the tools. I've been in this role now for coming up 4 years, and I'm joined today by Phil from ICL. If you want to give a little bit of an overview about yourself, Phil, give a little bit of background.
Yeah, no problem, Chris. Good evening, everyone. As Chris says, I'm Phil Collinson. I work for a company called ICL, which is a fertiliser manufacturer at its core, really. My role is currently supporting Northwest turf managers on advice around fertiliser use, chemical use, making sure we're being responsible, making some good advice. But before I joined ICL, I was head groundsman at Rochdale Football Club for almost 10 years. That's going back some time. Like Chris, I've been in for a couple of decades now. 25 years it'll be this year, Chris, can you imagine? So yeah, kind of held jobs of managing turf, cricket, bowls, football, and then got into the sales side of the industry later in my career, where I've successfully become basis and facts qualified, which for those that maybe aren't familiar with those qualifications, it means that I've kind of shown to be safe and responsible in my advice around fertiliser use and chemicals and the such like.
Brilliant. Cheers, Phil. Thank you. And I'm also joined by Richard Hardcastle. Rich, if you want to give a little bit of an intro about yourself, I won't steal your thunder.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name's Richard Hardcastle, the director of a small family sports ground contracting business called Hardcastle Amenity. Brother is involved in the business. Father he's retired now. We grew up as kids in the business, still involved today. We're primarily a renovation contractor of all sports surfaces, football, rugby, golf, bowls. And we do venture into small drainage schemes, irrigation, but primarily renovation. All facets of renovation: seeding, spraying, fertilising, verti-draining, etc., etc. Things are about to start getting busy now, so you probably see I'm a little bit tired out today. Sat at the verti drain machine all day, shaking me to bits. So that's in a nutshell. That's our business.
At least the sun was shining though, Richie.
Yeah, it makes a change, doesn't it, Chris?
It does,
Certainly
yeah.
does.
Absolutely.
It's been a painful winter.
Yeah, a long one as well. Well, what seems like a long one, certainly from Christmas anyway, onwards. So, in terms of who I work for the GMA, which we have the pitch advisory service. So that's part of the sector of the organisation that I work for. So we work alongside the county football associations and the football foundation, providing advice, trying to raise the standards of grassroots sports. We offer training, hence this workshop. This is part of it, but not just that. We offer full-time and part-time qualifications. If anybody's interested, then you can, once these slides come out, you can scan and you can have a look, or have a look on our website for further information on those courses if you wish to do them. Some of you will have done the level 1, which is part of the stipulation for funding for any grass pitch funding or maintenance machinery. So if you have done those, then if you enjoyed them and fancy challenging yourself and going on to level 2 and 3, then feel free to do so and follow the links there if you'd like to gain a bit more knowledge. But hopefully you gain some knowledge from this. That's the idea of doing it. So this week is actually Grounds Week. For those that don't know, Grounds Week is where we raise awareness of the sector and what we do in the industry, that we are basically the facilitators and we provide the services, and without ground staff, football isn't possible. ICL, who Phil works for, are one of the sponsors for this. They've worked closely on this week, allowing us to promote the industry on what we've done. I don't know if you want to have a bit of an input there, Phil, in terms of ICL and Grounds Week and anything that you may have done if you've been busy this week.
I think it's a great initiative, isn't it? And I think over the years we've seen it grow and grow. And it's I remember back to my groundsman days, you always felt like you were the unsung hero, but never wanted to sing about it. So it's great that the organisation, the GMA and supporting partners can fly the flag. And we do it all year round, of course, but to make a special effort this week to bang the drum and let people know about the good work that grounds teams are doing from grassroots all the way up to to the elite level of Premier League and beyond. But it's much needed, sadly. I don't think that the hard work of volunteers and professional ground staff, it doesn't get recognised enough, does it? So as a business, we're really proud to support this initiative.
Yeah, it doesn't get recognised enough, and I think the hard work that I see from volunteers and certainly from the industry as a whole is certainly under recognised from coaches, from playing staff, all the way through to some of the directors of organisations, committees, etc. don't understand what goes into preparing a playing surface. So the more awareness we can raise around that is fantastic. So if you do use social media, the hashtag is Grounds Week. And if you would like to put something on, or like to post, or even like to search and see some of the things that have been put on some of the promotional videos, and some of them are showcased on the likes of the BBC, Sky Sports News, etc. So if you do fancy having a look, have a gander. There's a lovely new video that the GMA have done around promotion that features the World Snooker organisation, which has been a success this week, which is great to see. So we also have Saltex. I don't want to go too much into this, but Saltex is an industry show that the GMA runs and manages, which this year will be celebrating its 80th exhibition. Returns in November to Birmingham NEC. So if anyone fancies going down there to have a look at all the types of machinery that you may be eligible for funding, Phil will be there. I'm sure Rich will be there, and pretty much the majority of the industry goes down there for a couple of days at a time when it's quiet and everybody gets together and has a look at all the new bits of kit that are on show. So GMA Connect, there is one in Leeds for the north. So GMA Connect is kind of like a smaller version of Saltex, where we kind of bring people together. There's different sessions going on throughout the day, and there's different machinery on that's showcased, demonstrated. So it's at Headingley in Leeds on the 19th of May. If anybody fancies going, there'll be a tour and a look around the facilities there. I know I'll be going. I don't know if Rich is going. I assume you'll be planning on going, Phil.
Yeah, it's out. It's on the other side of the Pennines, Chris, and I don't go on holiday at that time. No, I'll try and get to some of those events. They look great.
Yeah. So if you do fancy going, you can book your place on the GMA's website. Brill. So let's get into the nitty gritty. End of season renovations. So this is what we're going to be looking at. So I thought it wouldn't be, well, basically the main operations that are associated with it. We'll have a little look at those, but I want to just talk about some discussion points which I think we can refer back to as we go through this discussion that me, Phil, and Rich are going to have. So operations that are typically associated with renovations. Planning, I would say that is one that's not really thought about. The grounds industry just tends to react to situations. I suppose you'll probably see that most, Rich, within your role.
That's the biggest point on there. Planning, all the rest follows. It's key to planning. Getting ahead. You can't be reactionary. It's just not, it just does not work.
Yeah, and I suppose after the winter we've just had, I mean, I spoke to you earlier this week, and you said your phone's not stopped ringing for the last few days. I suppose after the winter we've had, it's people are going to react and try and think, oh, the weather's getting better this week, the sun's shining, and everyone thinks about renovations.
Yeah, we really need to start considering it in January. Get prepared for your fertilizer on, get your seed orders in, because everybody else is after the same materials. You get stuck with shortage of supply in some cases, and then that delays everything. You miss the window opportunity, and that's what it's all about: hitting those windows when they arrive.
Yeah, absolutely. You got anything to add on that, Phil? You've been busy last week with the weather and although you've had a bit of snow your way, I think, haven't you?
Yeah, we had all 4 seasons yesterday. We had sun, snow, sleet, had it all. But I just kind of to back up what Richard said there, really, that you plan ahead. You see the turf managers that achieve the best renovations or the smoothest process, I would say, through there and established turf well. It's because they've planned for it. It doesn't happen by chance. So we know that what we're doing is an art, it's a skill, and planning ahead that little bit in advance certainly pays dividends.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the other points, we're going to discuss all these in a bit more detail. So we're going to look at mowing, scarification, all the typical practices that you would associate with renovations, and all the typical things that go on to maintain the standards of a good pitch, or even if you're not maintaining it, to get a pitch to a good standard. So I need to address this, which is the winter we've just had. Which has been a washout, I would fair to say, especially since Christmas. There's a couple of highlights here. I just thought I'd have a look on the internet before we came on. A typical green space. Everybody's seen fields like that as we've been driving up and down the country. There's a wet football pitch there in the bottom right. It's been, a bog. We've seen news articles like this frequently. Wet winters, extremely frustrating grassroots football season, cancellations in league matches. But I think what's really what I'd like to pick your brains about, Phil, is this has not just been a challenge for the grassroots game, as it's been a challenge for trained professionals who are qualified working in the elite level. They've had challenges as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's okay for the pitches that maybe have spent £1 million on them and be kind of constructed from the gravel layer up to the surface and almost essentially beaches, so they can handle the levels of rain we've been having. But you start to get into grounds of maybe League One, League Two status that have had significant, they still had significant investment over the years on drainage, but they've suffered this year. And kind of maybe being a bit reactionary, Richard, getting the Vertrainer out on a Friday or a Saturday morning, trying to get those games on. So it's if those guys are suffering, I can only feel for grassroots, kind of where they haven't had that level of investment, and we're dealing predominantly with heavy pitches, perhaps, that we get a winter like this, and it really shows up the flaws of having underfunded grassroots in terms of drainage.
I think one thing that's worth touching on here as well is that some of the pitches that we've seen, maybe in the FA Cup rounds, let's say, for example, as we're looking on at them, is that some of the pitches are looked at and to say, well, these are up to standard that you would expect to see now when you're watching the game on TV. But the feedback that I've been getting is that some of these training grounds that we have, for example, that are some of them are no differently constructed to what these guys are playing on at grassroots level. So because them pitches are wet, they're coming to the stadium to train. and then it looks like the pitch is being overplayed, etc., and you're seeing excessive wear on them. There's been a few times that's been pointed out to me over the last few months, and I think what's been really difficult is to manage that usage as well, which is again is a challenge that grassroots football clubs have, the usage. I know you say, Rich, do you? Some of the clubs that you go to and some of the times that you travel around, you struggle in terms of trying to trying to get, I wouldn't say really volunteers, but trying to get the wider bodies to understand that are involved in those clubs.
Yeah, with it being as wet as it has been, sometimes the best thing is nothing. It's acceptance. If you haven't got a proper construction,
Yeah.
Being reactionary can often make matters worse. Being asked to put a vertidrain over wet ground will make it worse. You'll just seal the surface, and you're doing nothing good but putting good money over bad. So acceptance and just riding out the storm, unfortunately, preserve your pitches. I've seen a lot that have, and they're in the best condition now than I've ever seen them come out of winter, just because they haven't been on them, which is as it would be expected. But those who are pushed have just trashed the pitches, and they're in a bit of a pickle at the moment trying to get surface back on them.
Yeah. No, that's really, really good. And I suppose one thing that I'm trying to get here, Phil, is that everyone's in the same position. It's not like, I think sometimes from speaking to some of the volunteers that are working on the ground, such as some of the people on the call, is that I'm getting, is this, is everybody in the same boat? Is everybody, no pun intended there, by the way, as we look at those pictures on the screen, but is everybody in, in a similar situation?
Yeah, to a point. Like I said, the elite pitches that spent £1 million on it could, infiltration rates of maybe 500 mil an hour. They're never going to get a postponed game. But anyone that's kind of around 50 to 100 mil, we've had some really, really wet days. Even, we've had championship games called off at waterlogged pitches this year. That shows how wet it's been. So if the guys at that level are struggling, then yeah, like you say, everyone is in the same boat to an extent, aren't they? And it's how you react to that. And does that lead to conversations about funding and what are the options? And I'm sure when you have a winter like this, it does cause reactionary conversations. But
Absolutely.
in terms of solving that problem, we all know it's not easy, it's not cheap. You can do some remedial work maybe, but if those winters are becoming the norm, then all of a sudden conversations do start, don't they, about should we have it as a summer sport? Because our artificial pitches are the way forward. And none of us want that. We all want winter sport. For me anyway, it's a winter sport played on grass. And it's how do we combat those changes in climates that are coming our way, perhaps, that we need to be exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. There's certainly been some interesting discussions. I think one of the points around, the summer sport and using pitches at the times of summer is you might as well play football on the M1. Some of the you'll see that, Richard, as you go around, how firm some of them surfaces are. So we measure firmness in gravities using an implement, and I've been on clay-based football pitches that are as hard as a motorway would be.
Yeah.
And all that does is it's head injuries, the implications of ligaments, etc., and all the tendons in the body of especially young people are growing up. But yeah,
I'm sure cricket clubs would have something to say about it as well. I used to play cricket in the summer, football in the winter. That was my routine. And but yeah, I guess renovations give us a window of opportunity to maybe help and address those issues that we're faced with to a certain extent.
Absolutely, and that's where the likes of yourself come in, Richard, who can go out and do the work.
Yeah, even on a piecemeal basis, installing a little bit of drainage and just building each year, just putting a reserve aside for a little bit of drainage work every year. I often find you get some real isolated cases on pitches, real wet holes, and you can just put a single drain through that and then add on to it in the following years. If you don't have the funds to have a huge investment of a full, primary drainage system,
Yeah, I think we're seeing that a lot more. So if you are interested in drainage funding, there is funding available. So speak to your county FAs. There's two different pots. There's one for a desktop, which is kind of a smaller pot, the smaller grant, 25k, and then they have the larger grants, which is kind of sits around the £100,000 capital mark. But I'm going to move on. So I'm going to look at, if my computer wakes up, there we go. So as we head into the summer, one thing I saw last year was people seeding at the times when it was 40 degrees. And I'm conscious of the use of water. Phil, you addressed earlier that you're quite sustainable in the advice that you're giving and the way that you're looking at, for example, if it's not going to rain, fertilizer isn't going to work, seed isn't going to go in the ground, and it's just going to be a waste of money. So I thought I'd just kind of look at this in the way that we do see a summer like we saw last year. I mean, I'm looking at one grass pitch here. If we're putting 10,000 litres on, which is a typical irrigation tank, and you're putting that onto your pitch on one pitch a day, which your grass needs to survive. So if you're looking at ET rates of 5 to 7 millimetre a day that you're losing, evapotranspiration rates through the grass plant, you might as well just literally be losing that. You might be just losing that to the wind and the heat, and it can be expensive. So across Yorkshire and the North East at the moment, you're looking at £1.63 to £2.18 per metre cubed of water. If you base that on 180 days of annual costs, you could be looking at somewhere between £3,000 to £4,000 in water bills, which is a lot of money. And that's just for one pitch. And that's if we have a kind summer. I would say an average one, but if we have a one as hot as we did last year. So what do you see ways of getting around this, Rich? Have you done anything? You've tried anything as a contractor in terms of seeding times and
Rain dance. Just pray. Going back to what we were saying earlier about being reactionary to weather systems, installing drainage to cope with very wet pitches in the winter can have a detrimental impact in the summer, as we're seeing extremes, pulling more moisture out the ground, particularly on heavy clay pitches. We see them cracking open and drain lines sinking. So, every action has an equal sort of opposite reaction. So you got to look at the effects of everything you're doing into the ground, throughout the seasons. So we don't really get much involved in irrigation, watering. I think the best thing to do, my advice, is water your goal mouths and your centre spots, which are typically void of grass. The rest, will just go dormant, you find. And then when the rain comes, you worry. You think, what was I worrying about? When everything comes good. So just look after those bare areas that you've put a lot of effort into. Renovating goal mouths, centre spots. You can't really afford to water the whole pitch on a daily, unless you have the luxury of irrigation, rain trains, etc., boreholes. Huge expense. It's not often I find clubs with those facilities.
Yeah, there's times last year when I was driving around and people had, I would say, like a garden sprinkler on the football pitch. It's it's not really going to achieve much. It's probably, you could see it blowing in the wind and it's that hot that as soon as it hits the ground, it's near enough going to be evaporated. And it's kind of, I suppose what I'm doing here is highlighting that this money could probably be invested in other areas, such as drainage, etc. Grass, as you said, does become dormant. And it will come back, because it's shown this playing season. As soon as we got to autumn, it's the clubs that were a little bit more proactive in terms of seeding and taking that opportunity in autumn before the season started, and not how many bags of grass seed could you get for that? You're talking, you could get a few hundred bags of grass seed probably for £4,000, and it's a lot of money that you could you could use it in other areas, couldn't you? If you're just seeding at the correct times. Any thoughts on that, Phil?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Rich. Is kind of, we're dealing at a point here where we're not corralling the pitch off, are we? We've kind of got these isolated areas that we're trying to restore through this period, and just being judicious with your water usage. Yes, you don't want to be invested in seed only to see it come up and then burn away, and watering goal mouths and centre spots seems sensible to me. Some of the, not to make it a sales pitch, but something you can be thinking about, maybe wetting agent granules that allow you to get more use out of your water, so kind of making the water work better for you. But it's if we get a hot, dry summer, yeah, we're all at the mercy. And the worst thing you want to be doing, I suppose, is kind of overseeding and turn your seed into bird feed and still be faced with the problems. You're better off just waiting for those. I just think wait for the school holidays. It always rains in the school holidays, and it's now I've got kids. I finally realise that is definitely true. But yeah, just holding off and waiting to make sure you get the most value out of the inputs that you are putting on.
In recent years, the strategy we've turned to is getting the seed drilled in at earliest opportunity, even whilst you're coming to the end of the season. You know, April time is more to gain than leaving it till June. I mean, it's becoming a bit of a waste of time, June, July, sowing seed. Get the seed in the ground. We like to disc it in. Your growing node is protected and your roots promoted. It establishes 2 months, and then it'll just go dormant. Rather than drilling it in June, it strikes and then it just burns off and then it's dead. It won't come back. And if you've got any damage to your high intensity wear areas, you know, whilst your games are continuing, you can just pick that up with a little bit of pedestrian seeding, you know, to make good. We've really found that you make more gains getting on early while the season's still coming to an end. April time is really last 2 weeks in March, April, first 2 weeks in May. I don't like to try to disc it any later than that, really. Now it used to be we'd wait till the end of the season, end of May, no problem. June, no problem. We wouldn't really worry about it. But now we've had to change with the times. We can always disc seed in autumn. Another strategy of spreading your bets, but then you've got more expense of 2 visits to drill the seed twice. And then you start to run out of time with it maturing. So if I had any advice, get your seed in the ground. Optimum time, I'd say April. That's what I see most results. Get your grass on the boil with your fertilizer first, as early as possible. End of February, March, you get some natural recovery of the native grasses, offers some cover to your seedlings. That's priority. Everything else follows. That's the real key for a good renovation nowadays with the weather climate as it is.
Yeah, I suppose what we don't really see no more is colder winters, so the soil temperatures don't drop as, you know, when I was in the industry, and I suppose you, Phil, you know, going back, you know, on the tools when at those times you used to have frost lines that were, you know, 200-300 mil deep into the soil. We don't get that no more, do we? So the soil temperatures don't get quite as cold as what we were for a prolonged period, and they seem to warm up a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was at a football club this week that had done some kind of broadcast seeding. It wasn't even drilled in, and you could see it was starting to come already, and that's what end of March. I don't think I'd have got that back in my Rochdale days 15 years ago.
You've had frost sheets on still.
I'd have had my feet up playing darts, no doubt, still frozen solid.
Cheers, lads. Thank you very much. So planning, I'm just going to touch this in a little bit more detail. You've kind of discussed this already, Richard. You got anything to add, Phil, in terms of planning and, you know, booking contractors, ordering materials? How does your ordering materials, if I wanted to order some materials with you, how does that process sort of work? How long does it take?
Yeah, I think most companies these days are kind of a bit like Easter eggs. You know, next week we're going to the shops now and you see those Easter eggs. It was all probably made before Christmas, wasn't it? And
yeah.
So as a fertiliser company making spring fertilisers back end of last year, we get fully stocked up, ready for the mad rush of spring, I suppose. So like Richard said before, though, just for that peace of mind, by planning, making your supplier aware that what your needs are going to be, they can give you guidance on timelines. But I would say that the more time you give your suppliers, the easier the whole process is. Where we don't like it, I suppose, is when people phone up on a Friday and say, I need it on a Monday. And it's like, that's when the pressure points can be. So yeah, planning ahead, being clear with your supplier what you're going to need, makes the whole process a lot easier.
Real. Just out of interest, Richard, how many clubs send you through pitch power reports and say, can you do the renovations as per this report? Do you get many?
I ask everybody to send the report through initially. I have a good
Yeah.
read, then I insist on a site visit before I quote.
Yeah.
See for myself. There's lots of things to consider, access, etc. But I need to see the site for myself. I don't really like just quoting from a report.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No.
A good feel for it. So I like to get out early doors, December, January, see the pitch, get a feel for it, make some recommendations,
Yeah.
and then plan ahead.
One thing I'm keen to ask, in this, I've had this question a lot recently, is clubs closing down pitches for the summer while renovations are going on. As a contractor, are you insistent on that? Did you give guidelines and say, can you stay off this pitch for
I say I always give guidelines. It's preferable to, but it doesn't really work because a lot of clubs now have galas on their pitches, and it's a big earner for them. It helps inject money back into the pitches and the club. So you can't flatly refuse it. We have workarounds where we, move the pitch, move out the goal mouths, use another area of the land. Just try and just make the best compromise we can between us both, because I recognise they need to still earn an income, bring money into the club to keep it viable.
Absolutely.
So I don't only really sort of insist that they keep out of goal mouths, which need all the protection they can, rope them off, particularly on council pitches where the club might themselves just look after the area, stay off, but then you've got play coming in from the locals, that just undoes everything you do. So we try and rope everything off, take the goalposts down, or even set up some goalposts off pitch so people can still play, but without interfering with the renovation works and the success of it.
Real excellent. Cheers, guys. So contractors, most county FAs, by the way, will have like a kind of a rough guide and a rough list of who they've worked with or who have worked on the programme. So I know you're in the West Riding brochure, for example, Richard, which Dan and Andy and now Tom have put together. And I suppose it's understanding, areas of case studies and where people have done this work. I think one thing that maybe it refers back to Grounds Week actually is that the industry is struggling for staff in it, Phil. They're struggling for experts across as a whole. And I think what we're seeing with all the funding that's now going into grass pitches is the industry struggles to be able to have the expertise to support all that money that comes in, and to make sure that any of that money is spent in the right area and spent correctly. There's been some good discussion points that we've had so far. You got anything to add there? What do you think in terms of the way the industry's set up and the way that it's set up to support the program? And where would you go for expertise? If you were looking?
Is that me?
Yes, go on, Phil.
Yeah. My advice to everyone, because we obviously get phone calls, say, do you know anyone? And it's typically people who are good out there have got a proven track record. Speak to other clubs, I would suggest, and say who's worked well for you. And it's very much a word of mouth industry, ours, isn't it? There isn't like a checker trade for ground staff, really. It is word of mouth. That's what I love about the industry, that it is a community feel. And if you are looking for a contract, obviously, Richard, you'd be my number one. But speak to other clubs, what's worked well for them, and I don't think people can go too far wrong. I don't know, Richard, you might have more experience than me in this place. But...
Well, I must say that this process has injected a lot of work into the marketplace, and it's sort of overwhelming. And there's not enough contractors, I don't believe, out there to undertake all the work at once. It's a little like how we need loads of houses building, and we need them yesterday. It just doesn't happen, we just seem to be a bit reactionary again in everything we do in this country. So that is the difficulty as a contractor, or speaking for everybody, undertaking all the work in the small amount of time we have to do it. And you need to be, sustainable as well. So you might be busy for 3 months, but you need to see out the winter, see out the rest of the year. So a lot of businesses come and then go because they can't make it work all year round. So we find new contractors are available to undertake the work, but then they might disappear just because there's nothing there for the rest of the season or the year to keep them going. So it's peaks and troughs all the time. It's that's the hardest thing to deal with.
The peaks come with the good weather.
Pardon me. Yeah, it's a real challenge. It's a lot like farming, It's just all or nothing, all or nothing.
Well, that does support the earlier message of planning ahead, doesn't it? And getting your contractor booked in. That if you leave it too late to get someone, you might be getting someone that's not busy for a reason, or the person you want is saying, I can do it, but it's not going to be in the ideal time that you want. So yeah, it kind of supports that message.
We have good relationship with existing customers, and we always give them priority. But I do say, to everybody, look, it's first come, first serve. It's only fair for those that plan ahead that get dealt with first. And we like to do everything in an order that's most economical and efficient. So we like to put the seeder on the tractor and just go like a bit of a milk round from club to club, bang, 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 knock them all off in a space of weeks, and then the pressure's off, and then we can follow up with your top dressing, your sand spreading, your verti draining. It's not as critical the timing as long as we've got the right conditions at the time. So seeding is it's the most precious. It's the most pressure is on us when it comes to drilling seed and fertilizing, really. Then once that's over, the pressure's off and I can relax a little bit. So plan ahead of time. In the winter when you're not even it's not in the forefront of your mind, but it needs to change.
Absolutely. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much. Right, we're going to look at end of season operations now. Go through all the operations that we would typically see, end of season renovations. So the reason I included this is because I always get questions, should I reduce my cutting height? Now, typically I would say yes. If you're going to be doing scarification, seeding, etc., to get a bit of daylight into the grass plant, allow for the seed to get some light, etc. But one thing that we've seen a lot is, do they actually need to reduce it a lot? So, I mean, typically some people have historically said we should be going down to 10 mil. I'm conscious, I'm even conscious at 15 because the temperatures get up. Like last year, if you'd have done that in March and then all of a sudden the temperature shot up, you'd have been susceptible to you losing your grass cover a lot earlier. Then you'd have had a bit more leaf on the plant. So I think what I'm highlighting here is the operations around that. So if people are using local authorities, etc., do they need to get additional contractors in to do some mowing prior to maintenance? Do they need to adjust their plans in terms of what they're doing before the renovations happen? What's your thoughts on this, Phil? Typical renovations you see, would you see cutting height reduced, or would you not see that affected in what the clubs are about to do at grassroots level? Obviously it's a bit different when you come to the elite level.
Yeah, obviously those guys will be shaving it down, if not removing all the vegetation to get the new grasses in there. I think that we ask ourselves, well, why do we want to bring that height down? It's to give the opportunity for those seedlings to establish.
Yeah.
So we're creating space, aren't we? So it makes sense to bring it down to me, but I wouldn't want to be putting it under undue pressure because, like you've highlighted there, Chris, all it takes is for that weather to go against you and you've put a plant that's already into shock under intense environmental pressures, and if that grass itself could start failing. So what typical heights of cut do you see at grassroots? Are we talking 30 mil typically or 26? Where do you see it?
I think in my experience, the best height of cut seems to be around 40 to 50 mil.
Yeah, okay.
Which you may think is quite high, but in terms of recovery, protection of the surface, and being able to withstand the drought stress and go into the season in the best possible position, I think that is probably evidenced in some of the work. I don't know what you see, Richard. You drive around as well as me. You know, like that kind of height of cut. I mean, I went to a football pitch that's just down the road from me. It's primary and secondary drained. Their height of cut's up at 70 mil, and they've played throughout the season with that. But they're wanting to make sure that the pitch holds some stability and doesn't obviously lose grass cover quickly. And also, they will increase that to near enough 100 mil and then drop it down prior to the season starting.
Yeah, I find it offers a lot of protection to the young seedlings underneath, particularly with regards to the hot weather we had last year.
Yeah.
We don't really see a loss of turf, density of the sward when you start to lower it, coming into the actual playing season. For those that actually, particularly council pitches where they were shaved down, to 10, 12 mil, they really suffered last year.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Heck of a lot of grass cover lost, and the ceilings that were drilled, they were exposed, and they just put under so much more pressure. So I think, like you say, 40 mil, 50 mil, some cases just offers a little bit more protection. But we need to keep it at a consistent height. One thing you may not think about is when we come to disking our seed, the worst thing for us is drilling seed on pitches that have been cut infrequently, and you get lots of grass. It just blocks up the coulters and really presents a huge problem for drilling seed. It just blocks up the seed coulters and the tubes and everything. So just frequency of cut. Let's not let it grow out long and then chop it down to 50 mil. Let's just keep it at a good height consistently.
Yeah.
There's a conversation there more around, rather than bringing that height of cut down, it's cleanliness of surface, really.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And I mean, this is kind of, I would say, more GMA guidance, but I'm really, I suppose what I'm doing is I'm challenging that guidance as to what I've seen over the last few months. Well, I would say, to be honest with you, last 3 or 4 years. But and looking at the months that I've just been around, those pitches that are cut slightly higher, where the surface has been a little bit more protected, and they haven't suffered as much wear. For example, when kids have been playing on them in probably conditions when games shouldn't have gone ahead. So I think, yeah, the conversation is more around, it's mowing in general, to be honest with you. I mean, if you say, if Richard, some of the council pitches are cut down at 12 mil and it's just leading to an infestation of unwanted grasses, then you have other problems. You get into the summer and then those grasses can't withstand the heat, and it's kind of, it's just one problem after another. Mowing is probably the most important, well, not probably, is the most important thing that you do. And if you're not aware, there is machinery grants for funding for mowers. If you don't have them, or you're looking to take ownership of your own mowing, if you'd like to do that, then yeah, do look at the machinery grants that are available on the Football Foundation's website. So I'm going to move on now to the next one, which is scarification. Again, here, sometimes, I mean, we've had a really wet winter, so there's going to be a lot of debris. I tend to find we get a lot more thatch build-up because of those anaerobic conditions, and there's not as much oxygen in the soil profile, and we tend to have, well, I've been reading just before we came on the webinar about infestation of moss because of all the wet weather we've had. And I could see shade lines on trees when I've been out and about, and you can see some of those wetter areas that you can clearly see may benefit from raking and maybe scarification. Are you scarifying many sites, Rich? Do you do that often?
Only the worst, only the worst. I mean, each site can vary pitch to pitch too, so it's something that I would reserve for the really thatchy ones. A little bit of thatch in the surface ain't bad, just holds the turf together,
Yeah.
So I'd say probably about 25% of the pitches I'd scarify early doors when we've got strong growth just before we seed to clean out the bottom. It's not essential on all pitches, I find. Most of them are threadbare, coming out of winter. Just a pointless exercise. It's money that could be used better elsewhere.
Absolutely, with the overuse of pitches, I think they scarify themselves, don't they? Particularly in some of the central areas.
Yeah, I mean, not overfeeding either. Using Phil talk more about using sensible inputs of fertilizer, so you're not just getting flushes of growth that you just have to deal with.
And then scarify and then mowing regularly as well.
Yeah, it's just one forward and two back. You're just spending more money then to control the grass that you've just made grow excessively.
Yeah. You scarify many pitches at Rochdale. I assume it was a regular practice, Phil, that you would do annually.
We were at the point where we were trying to remove all surface matter and start again and try and get those infiltration rates up as high as possible, really. But I guess what I was listening to there is just it's site specific, it's situation specific, isn't it? That it's not just I should be doing it, so therefore I'm going to do it. It's like look at your pitch. What would the benefits of scarifying be? Because if it's not needed, save the money. Don't put the added stress on your pitch ahead of a potential stressful summer.
Don't forget, not all the native grasses of these pitches aren't. It's not just rye, 100% rye. There's a lot of fescue and creeping bents and in there. They're the ones that need the scarification, I find, more than others. They're the real thatch productive grasses. Those with 100% rye or predominant rye don't really need scarifying, I found, at grassroots level.
Yeah. I think, to be honest with you as well, with clubs getting the quadruplay, a lot of clubs have them, the Sisis quadruplays, and can get out and do a little bit of slitting, a bit of grooming themselves, a bit of raking, etc. I think it does benefit the surface, if you're doing that regularly throughout the playing season, and you come out of the playing season with quite a clean profile, then you may not need to do it, But for those, I tend to think it more becomes an issue when you bring in areas into play. I think that maybe if the council or some form of local authorities maybe mowed it 12 times a year and it's not really had any football on it. That's probably a scenario that you're referring to, Richard. I think around that's kind of where I would recommend it. It's very rare I put it in a pitch power report unless it's a step club or a football pitch that's coming back into play.
Yeah.
Brill. Right, next. Decompaction, the big one, the most important one. Aside from mowing, I would say, and probably I've been to a site today, to be honest with you, that had benefited greatly from a bit of decompaction. I think, to be honest with you, with some of the peak guys that get machinery, they get slitters, they get these the combination tools such as the quadruplay, and I see a lot of pans now, Richard. You go around and verti-drain a lot of pitches. Do you come across that? Do you come across compact pitches often? Some of the benefits you've seen of verti-draining some of these pitches.
Absolutely. I mean, it's essential. Twice a year. I turn up and you can just look at a pitch and see, growth inhibited because of compaction. I'm often asked when I go to verti-drain a pitch, set it as deep as you can, get the tines down, but you find that the pans are at different layers. So, like today, I was only verti-draining at like 7-inch just because it's been verti-drained many times before. And just coming out of winter, the compaction is not at great depth. It's, it's just below the surface. So I like to vary the depth of the tines to get the fracturing at different layers to promote root growth downwards. It's no good just going straight down to the bottom and heaving right at the bottom. We like to go down in 1-2 inch increments each year and then back up again, so we don't get any root breaks. So that's
I think the amount of benefits it's given some clubs. If you look, the reduced cancellations in football, I think that's pretty much a given. It's not a be all and end all, it doesn't stop you having cancellations, but it certainly helps. And I think coming into a time of renovations, Phil, how important do you think it is in terms of, you're going to be putting fertilizer down, you're going to be putting seed down, what can the benefits of decompaction ahead of, as part of that renovation practice and getting the best use out of maybe some of the products that you supply?
Yeah, it kind of starts at the ground up, doesn't it? I know we always look at the surface as kind of as a way of judging our playing surface, of course, but actually what's going on underground, what do we need to get through those stressful periods of drought? We're going to need deep rooting and roots grow in air, and we need air. And like Richard was saying there, fracturing the root zone or the soil at the right depth creates those fissures, creates those air pockets where roots can go down. And then when we do get stresses of drought, maybe we've got a better network of roots that can access water in places it previously wouldn't have done. And I think vertidraining for a long time when I was grounds would have been looked at, yeah, you save your games, you get games on, improve the number of hours you're playing on your pitches, but really the health benefits to the plant go way beyond getting games on. It's about developing deep rooting, having a healthy soil, coming out of a really wet winter. You mentioned anaerobic conditions. I dare say that some people on this webinar, if they were to look down in their root zone, would find that kind of the black layer maybe in certain pockets and that kind of sulfur smell going on. Well, we need air in there. We need air to convert the respiration from anaerobic to aerobic. Sorry, I'm going a bit turf geeky on people there, but they'll understand, I'm sure, that we need to have a healthy soil, and a healthy soil needs air. So yeah, doing decompaction ahead of the summer has many benefits. And I'm just looking through your bullet points there, Chris, and going, yeah, we want to improve drainage. Yeah, we want overall turf health. There's lots in here that, like Richard was saying before, 2 passes of a vertidrain over a year. That's going to be some of the best money you'll spend, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You only have to take a core out of the ground a couple of months after you've vertidrained, and you split that core open, and you'll see the white fibrous roots going down the vertidrain holes. We all need to be reminded that roots grow in air pockets, not soil. So when you see something like that, it proves that the huge benefits of aeration. And in fact, come summer, when you vertidrained in spring, you can almost see that polka dot type effect over a pitch. Well, I can, where you got the darker green grasses which have thrown the roots down vertidrain holes. The more often you do that, the stronger, more resilient plant you get, and the better your chances of coming out of the stresses of summer are.
And the benefits go into, you mentioned about water usage earlier on. If you've got deeper root systems, they can access more water. You get more out of that irrigation water that you put on, all those odd bits of rainfall that we might get. You've got more potential to capture that with deeper rooting. We'll talk about fertilizers later on. Well, you'll have more chance of capturing that fertilizer by having a healthy root zone and healthy root systems. You make the whole thing more efficient, and vertidrain and aeration, decompaction all plays into that.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely great point, that Phil. Yeah, it certainly does, without a shadow of a doubt. Brilliant. So I'll move on. Restoring surface levels. You've mentioned earlier, Richard, around goal mouths, those areas that you typically see that destabilise because they lose grass cover, then start to dish, and then we start to lose some of our levels. So I'm not really a fan of spending loads of money on sand. It takes a long time and a lot of volume of sand to change your soil profile. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen with 2 or 3 applications. And given the price that we see a sand fill, it's gone through the roof, hasn't it? In terms of what you're paying from the quarry now.
Yeah, and my cricket club that I used to play with, they're looking at doing some renovation work on their cricket outfields. I know this isn't about cricket, but they sent me over a quote on sand, and it was like the whole quote for the thing was about £8,000. It was like, out of that £8,000, I think 3.5 of it was sand for 60 ton, and I was like, just what is the aim here? If the aim is to improve drainage and the aim is to improve the surface, that 60 ton of sand at £3.5 may not be as valuable as what you think it is. So yeah, it does. It's not cheap, but that's not to say it doesn't have benefits. And kind of,
absolutely,
I'd be interested in your expertise here, Richard, to say, where do you see, if budgets are tight, where do you top dress, and where do you think it doesn't have value?
Well, we try to stretch that money, as far as we can, and like you say, Phil, just blasting a lot of sand over the whole pitch is not really your answer to changing anything. You're not really achieving anything. So what we tend to do is, put it through the centre diamond, down the centre third. So you could put 60 ton down the centre third of 3 pitches rather than just on 1 pitch. it does have great benefits. It's not going to change your soil characteristics overnight. We all know that. It takes a long commitment, a huge expense. But what it does, it keeps your surface just that little bit drier, just less tacky. You know, the worm casts break up on a drier day when you're putting your surface groomer over with the goalkeeper, you know, moving around in his box all game. He's just picking up less sticky, tacky mud on his boots, which is taken away, and you know, over time contributes to that dished effect in your goal mouth. So I still like to use it, and I do like to spread the spend a little bit over everything. You know, it's just a balance. On sites that have, you know, I've got a good sandy nature. We have a machine called a recycling dresser. So it'll bring the native material to the surface, and then we can use that to loot out across the pitch. So making use of the native media, you know, if it's good enough, it's good on, you know, your sandy sites. This was in response to obviously the huge increase in sand. We have to, you know, do as best with what we've got.
I guess it's picking the right one as well. As I've seen people in the past going, "Oh, I've got a cheap sand," and it's like you pick it up and it's as fine as anything. You're going to go, that might not be the most suitable for the pitch.
Yeah.
Phil, do you know what? You have just stole
Oh,
or read the presentation. Look
apologies.
at that. No, you're all right. Feel free. So, yeah. So this is basically Mansfield sand, and just looking at some of the sands that we would, like you say, Phil. You know, I think. So to give you an idea of this, it's kind of looking for a certain type of sand within sports turf, and it's got to have, you know, looking for a medium coarse sand, really, a bit of fine in there, but not too much, because we don't want to block up all the pore spaces and create ourselves more problems. I know, looking at some of the, like the play sands, building sands, they're really low down the scale in terms of fines and what the fine content they've got. So it's not just any old sand, as you say, Phil, is it? It's not. We're not. That can lead to lots of problems.
Yeah, it can compound the issue, can't it? It's kind of, you're spending good money in a really bad way and adding to problems. It's something we need to avoid.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is from Mansfield Sand. I don't know what type of sand you use, Richard. I'm not too sure, but Mansfield Sand are a good, reputable supplier in terms of sport turf sand.
We use the Mansfield. It's 55 sand, a medium coarse, beautiful clean sand.
Yeah.
Lots of quarries have shut down over the years, and you can't get out what you used to be able to get out. My father used to be in sales for a long time, and he used to get you know, access all sorts of quarries up and down the country, but we're very limited now, or more limited.
It's HS2.
Yeah,
That's what we're blaming. HS2. Apparently, that's the reason for the hike in the quarry prices.
yeah. What they
They're
do
taking
with
all the sand.
silica sand, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do see a huge range of materials that are put into football pitches. You know, some often by those that aren't in the know. I get goal mouths dressed out with building sand. You know, constructed in building sand, even peat.
And nothing grows in them.
No, nothing goes in them, and they just compact. It's once it's down for a long time unless you hike it out. It just pans. It's a recurring problem. So spend your money wisely on the correct material.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take advice if you're not sure.
Yeah, definitely. So localized repairs, we've kind of discussed this, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, and I'm conscious of time. It's 7:30, and it seems like we've been here 5 minutes, but we've been talking for nearly an hour. So, in terms of, you know, repairing some of these low-lying areas, turfing, is that something you do, Rich, out on the field? Do you do much turfing?
No. In the worst cases, you know, rotivate the goal mouth off, incorporate some root zone into it. You know, again, incorporate a bit more sand. Those high traffic areas, seed up, and then ask the club to commit to watering frequently. turfing. Turfing is for us a bit more expensive. You're committed to keep that, alive more than the seed. It needs a heck of a lot of water, and you don't know what the weather's going to do. But one thing I insist on when I first take on a pitch is leveling up the goal mouths. I hate to see sunken goal mouths and centre spots. It's something that I just jump to first of all. Rotivate out, incorporate a load of material, level them up, seed them up with rye, and we can move forward then. Turfing's a good option if you can commit to keeping it alive.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing in it with turf, is trying to keep it. The amount of times I've been out on goal mouths where they also don't cut it in properly. So if you look around the edges here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but where they cut it in, it's not bedded in properly, and it's sat prouder than the actual pitch, or they've leveled it and then it's sank because they've not consolidated it properly. Which I've seen quite frequently out and about, and it takes some time to build them up as well. If you're not crowning it properly, and water just sits in it. So moving on, restoring grass cover. So we've kind of discussed this again. We kind of keep veering off and on certain slides and talking about different points, but we've kind of discussed around irrigation. So seeding rates. Seeding rates when you were at Rochdale, Phil, what were you roughly going at? Does it vary?
Yeah, if we were taking off the whole pitch, we might be up somewhere around 45 grams a square metre. But obviously in these situations, if we're overseeding into an existing sward and existing grasses, you can probably pull the rates back a little bit and make that seed go a little bit further. What we don't want to be doing. And I mean, there was a time when people were starting to go to like 60 grams a square metre, and I think that came around when it was the window of establishment was starting to come towards 6 weeks at professional level, and the temptation was to chuck more seed at it, therefore get my surface right. But all you find is that after about week 3 or week 4, it all starts smothering itself out and it starts to melt off. And people on this webinar may recognise that in terms of whenever you've been doing a bit of hand seeding, if you overseed or a bit falls out your hand and you get a pile, and you go, oh, I better just brush it with my hand and I'll try and thin it out a little bit. It's always too much. And it comes through and you go, wow, if all my pitch was like that, it'd be great. And you think that after like 10 days. And then 3-4 weeks later, it's all dying. It's all kind of going orange because it's all out competing. So again, Richard, I would go with your experience here. Kind of what rates do you see working well at grassroots where we're not overseeding into necessarily a completely surface removal situation where there's existing grasses there?
I tend to sort of disc drill the grass at 10 to 12 grams per pass. If it's sparser, if the pitch is sparse, add another pass. But 2 passes over a pitch without disc seeder, which is close spacings, looking at 40 mil, it's close enough without overcrowding. Like you said, Phil, putting too much seed down in a drill line just leads to overcrowding, damping off, and failure because it's all competing for the same space. Choice of seed. Ever since day one of the introduction of a creeping rye, I tend to use a blend of seed with four cultivars of rye, and one of which is a creeping rye. I'm of the firm belief that after all this is done and dusted, the pitch improvement scheme, we've got some grasses in there with a creeping nature that can self-repair, that are in there for good, and they're going to help the pitches going forward on their own. So yeah, you reap what you sow.
No pun there, Rich.
No pun there. No. You reap what you sow. Full of them. I'm trying to hold back tonight.
I suppose, Phil, what we see is there's a range of seed in the industry. It's not just as simple as going to B&Q and buying, some hardware and grass seed and chucking it down on your go mouth and thinking that you're going to get some great response.
No, there's a real science behind it, and breeders of seed will spend many, many years and God knows how much money making sure that they're breeding characteristics into their seed that will help turf managers out. And in football, we want quick to establish, hard wearing, stress tolerant, I would suggest. Yeah. And that's why we kind of lean towards perennial ryegrasses. But even within perennial ryegrasses, you'll have different cultivars with different strengths and different limitations. And typically football blends, the cultivars used from reputable companies, would have focused on that resilience, wear, quick to establish, hopefully some disease resistance in there as well. But the grasses that I was using maybe 15 years ago, advancements have been made in that time to maybe breed out some of the weaknesses that I would have seen and install more strength. So well worth taking time and speaking to suppliers and experts to understand the seed choice for your site. Of course, budgets come into it. You typically find that the grass seed being used at the top level will cost more than people may want to spend. But I do think that picking genetics, i.e. picking the right grass seed, the decision you make now about what you're going to overseed in April or May will play out in November, December, January next year. So don't take the decision lightly is what I would suggest.
Yeah, it's not just being wear tolerant as well. I suppose in the biggest problem in the grassroots game is having an environmental tolerance to drought as well.
Yeah.
Which we see cultivars now that are on the market that are more drought resistant. That you might like you say, you might pay a bit more of a premium for them. I don't know what you're using, Richard, but you may pay £5 a bag for more for a cultivar that's got a bit of drought resistance in it, which in the grand scheme of things, looking at the weather and looking at the way that some of the pitches burn off, so you see some of the ryegrass and how it withstands that. As you're going into the playing season, you can see how dominant it's become. So yeah, something worth considering, isn't it, as you're planning those renovations. So no, good stuff. So a few suppliers here that are probably local to you guys. Johnson's through DLF is Barenberg, and then you've got Hurrell's. So these are kind of, I would say, some of the more advanced breeders. You using one of these, Rich?
Yeah, one of them. We can't say which. I'm surprised to see Phil's. I'm surprised to see Phil's seed's not on there.
I'm going to say, after this, I'll email you a pack shot of our seed, Chris, and we'll get it on there for next month.
Yeah. Hey, this is my slide.
No, but honestly, even though they are inverted commas competitors, really reputable suppliers there, and the market is really competitive. So I'd say this now to people: if you deal with reputable companies, you'll do well to find a bad seed. It's like it's a really professional market, and they take it really, really seriously. So yeah, it's kind of what you said there, Chris. Stick with reputable suppliers, and you won't go far wrong.
I think that like you say, though, the advancements now are crazy. What we're seeing, the way that turf grass is bred now, it's specifically bred to be in football pitches, and it's advancing so much, and technology is, getting better and better and better every year, and it's worth having a look, reviewing what you're putting on year. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hand over to you now, Phil. I'm going to let you take us through these fertilizer bits, and hopefully, when we get to the end, there's just a little bit to cover on weed control, and then we're good to, which you can take as well if you want to, with your weed control hat on.
We'll see how many people stick on after I've presented for 10-15 minutes on fertilizers. So no, cheers again for the opportunity, Chris, and I'll give you the thumbs up when to move on slides if that's okay. But I'm conscious of time. I've probably got about 14 slides, so I'll give a whistle stop tour if that's all right. But the purpose of this slide is to highlight that as I go on to talk about fertilizers, that the success of a surface isn't down to fertilizers alone. There's many different inputs and areas of management that result in a good surface. And we've just mentioned good genetics about seed choice and light and air and temperature and soil. That kind of going into the period of renovations that we're about to enter, you'd like to think we've got enough light, we've got enough air on open pitches at grassroots level. The temperature should start going into our favour for germination and establishment. So things are going our way. Soil-based pitches have their shortcomings in terms of drainage through winter, but they do have their benefits in summer. They hold on to nutrition well, they hold on to moisture well compared to sand-based pitches. So that might be going our favour as well. I'll come on to the nutrients and what's important and maybe some take-home messages on what to be thinking about. Water we've covered, the maintenance, the height of cut, the way you look after your pitches, and potentially biostimulants, maybe not at grassroots level, but at high sand-dominated root zones where soil biology can maybe be restricted, that would have a part to play. But I'm going to talk a little bit now about nutrients. Chris, next slide. So we'll start off with why do we need to apply a fertilizer? Many different reasons. We can kind of keep the turf healthy, aids stress tolerance, aids recovery. We want that uniform surface, and by having even coverage and even growth allows us to achieve that. turf appearance, I would say, yes, we all like a nice green stripy pitch, don't we? It's probably not the highest reason why we apply a fertiliser, or should be. Probably not as relevant to this group, but I don't know. But when we're removing clippings off a pitch, obviously nutrients are contained in those clippings, so therefore we need to replace those to remain status quo. But essentially, we're looking to balance soil nutrients to deliver growth that we want. And there's occasions when we may not want growth, or we get natural growth at levels that we require, and therefore we don't need to apply fertiliser. But there are certainly occasions through the season at all levels that we need to be applying fertiliser. So when we talk about fertiliser, we're talking about essential nutrients. What does a plant need? And you'll see them all on the screen there. Hydrogen, oxygen and carbon. Well, we don't need to apply those in a fertiliser because it gets it through the air and through water. So H2O, of course, that's where the plant can get its hydrogen from, oxygen and carbon dioxide. So oxygen, carbon, we don't need to worry about those from a fertiliser point of view. But where we do need to be looking is kind of your macronutrients, and you'll see the 6 ones there, and the micronutrients, the 8 below that. For this call, and I say this to a lot of turf managers, ignore the micronutrients in the main, and certainly if you're dealing on a soil-based pitch. Soil-based pitches contain a high level of nutrients in themselves because they can hold on to a lot of nutrients. I dare say that anyone on this call will never come across a copper deficiency or a nickel deficiency. So first take-home message, focus mainly on your macros. And I would also say that you're probably only going to want to focus on one. Okay, next slide, Chris.
Go.
There we go. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of the macronutrients and what they're responsible for. Well, nitrogen, that is the driver of growth. You apply nitrogen to your situation, you'll get a growth response, and it drives the uptake of all the other nutrients behind it. So when I mentioned we're going to talk about one or focus on one, it would be nitrogen, okay? That's responsible for forming amino acids and proteins, which are essentially the building blocks of grass itself. Phosphorus, crucial for root development, okay? When we're talking specifically about establishing and renovations, when we're looking to develop a root system, this is one that you may be looking at in the next few weeks of a fertiliser that contains a healthy amount of phosphorus. You typically see this in pre-seed fertilisers for this reason. And phosphorus is the middle number, I'll come on to it, the middle number of your fertiliser. So you typically see an 8-12-8 as a pre-seeder. And that is us elevating those phosphorus levels because it's responsible for root development. As that seedling germinates and is looking to expand its root systems, phosphorus will be needed. Potassium needs for carbohydrate synthesis, but also mainly for water regulation. And when we're going into a drought stressful period, selecting a fertiliser to ensure you've got potassium available is probably a diligent decision to be making. Next slide, Chris. I'm conscious it's 15 minutes to go, and I could talk about fertilisers till the cows come home, but I won't. Calcium, another macronutrient, important for cell wall formation. So this is why typically you would see in marketing, if a product contains calcium, it says strong cell walls, wear resistance, wear tolerance. Magnesium is a central part of the chlorophyll molecule, which is what the turf needs to capture sunlight. It's the green part of the plant, which is why in marketing you would see magnesium products saying improves colour. And then sulfur, which is often seen as the bad boy of the nutrients in turf, because when people see sulfur, they associate it with black layer, and black layer being something we don't want to do. It's when we get that sulfur smell, eggy smell in your root zone, and that's a buildup of sulfides. However, in a normal functioning environment and for plant health, sulfur is actually needed by the plant in quite a lot. And you may sit there and think, well, I've never applied sulfur as a fertiliser. You will have done, it just won't be stated on the bag. Anything that contains something like ammonium sulfate or potassium sulfate, there is a sulfur element in that, which is why you'll never see sulfur deficiency on your turf. Okay, so that kind of covers the macronutrients fairly quickly. Next slide, Chris. Okay, so how do we look at a bag of fertiliser and understand the numbers on the front? Well, first of all, every fertiliser bag will have an NPK value, a nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And what that number represents is the percentage of that element in that bag. And what that then allows you to do is calculate how much you need of that fertilizer to apply to do the job you need to. And if people need a bit of advice, speak to your fertilizer supplier. They should be well versed in this to make sensible recommendations. Because if we get it wrong here, Chris, if we start applying a fertilizer with really high nitrogen on, you end up with a grass factory that you can't keep on top of. You end up with too much growth. If you apply one with too little on there, you don't get the response you want. So it's really important that we understand the product we're putting on and match it up to the job that we want it to do. So that is really important. Next slide.
Just before you carry on,
Yeah.
I think that's important in terms of, some of the earlier things that we were talking about scarification, mowing, all them come into product choice, don't they? And what you choose and what is suitable for you and what works for you, not just for, any scenario off the shelf. It's kind of a site-specific plan, isn't it?
Really good point, Chris. And one thing that I think everyone can do before they apply a fertilizer or plan to apply a fertilizer, what is the job that I need this fertilizer to do? Do I need it to last 6 weeks or 6 months? Do I want a quick boost or do I want a slow burner? And when you understand what response you want, you can then pick the right products, because there's a 20% fertilizer on there. Now, if that was all instant release, that is rocket fuel. But if that's a coated product, which it is, if that is a coated product, which is a controlled release, and you can get some that release over 6 months. Well, that 20% over 6 months is actually a slow burn. It's never going to turn into rocket fuel. So, yeah, you could do a whole afternoon on fertilizer technology. We haven't got the time, or probably at this point of the evening, the inclination. But there is a real science behind this, and there's some real technologies that we need to understand. But first and foremost, ask yourself the question: what is it I'm trying to achieve with this next application?
Really?
This is just some work that we did because I wanted to highlight to the group today that you can, if you're not careful and you go on Google or you go on YouTube videos, you can start getting lost in it all about how important some nutrients are. The take-home message I would say to this group is focus on nitrogen, and I think this slide sums it up really. What we did here is an experiment or a test to show what happens when you don't apply a certain nutrient. Okay, so if you look on the right hand side, you've got this what we call a control. That was turf or grass grown with every nutrient needed applied to it. And then subsequently to the left, in the first one, no micronutrients. So this had everything, all the nutrients, barring micronutrients. And you can see why we would say, don't get caught up spending vast amount of money on micronutrients, because they won't make much of a difference in your situation. And you can see sulfur. That's maybe I do need sulfur to support my plant because the growth looks a little bit restricted there. The chances are, and the odds are, that the fertilizer you're picking has got sulfur in anyway, because it's a component of many different fertilizers. Magnesium, calcium, phosphorus, potassium. You can kind of see through there that there's not a huge amount, maybe phosphorus, that supports my conversation before, my point before, that in an establishment phase, no phosphorus can hamper development because the root system won't be developing, won't be able to uptake the nutrients and create growth. But the one on the left-hand side, no nitrogen. Look, that's what happens when you don't supply the plant with nitrogen. It becomes weak, it becomes undeveloped. So, yeah, make sure you focus on your nitrogen inputs. Too much, we've got too much growth, but too little, we don't get the establishment that we want. And Richard, if you're out there and you're doing all your renovation, you've done everything perfect and you've got the seed in the ground, we need to make sure that after all that effort, we look after those seedlings when they're coming through. And nitrogen will be your friend in that situation. Next slide. 10 minutes. So how do we assess how much do we need of each nutrient? Well, if you want to go to that extra level, you can do soil analysis. Your supplier of fertilizer will no doubt be able to support you and supply these with you. Some charge, some don't. But if you are interested in looking what's in your soil, you can do a variety of tests to give you an indication of what's there already or what may be lacking, which helps determine your fertilizer recommendations. Next slide.
I'm having issues with this next slide. It's not
There we
liking me
go.
clicking on it.
That works. So you take a sample off your pitch. and you send it away to the lab, and then maybe a week or two later you get this result, and they'll give you some key metrics there, things that are really important to understand, things like pH. That's really important because if you're below a certain level, typically if you're below 5, that can start to hamper soil life. It can start to make aluminium soluble, which damages roots. And if it damages soil life and you're reliant on a fertilizer that requires soil life to make available to the plant, that can be challenging. Typically, you want to be between 5.5 and 7. You can see on this result, they're in the happy space. CEC is a metric that shows you how much nutrient your soil can hold. And if you're dealing with soil-based pitches, you're going to be high. Sand doesn't hold on to much nutrition or water, great for playability through winter, but soil-based pitches will hold on to nutrient. Therefore, what that signifies to us as an advisor is you're going to get good longevity and good holding capacity of your fertilizers. Therefore, you don't need as much, saves you a few quid. Salt levels never be an issue in the UK because we get too much rainfall for salt levels to get to damaging levels. But you can see there, you start to get an indication below that of your macronutrients and some of the trace elements in there. And you've got guidelines on the right-hand side that give you an indication of, do you need to apply them or not? So it takes it to another level of understanding and allows those recommendations of product to be a bit more site-specific and a bit more detailed.
Real.
Next. So what we would say about soil analysis, it shouldn't be the be-all and end-all. If anyone ever says to you, send me your soil results, I'll build your fertilizer program, be a little bit wary. We need to understand the site requirements, the grass species, a whole raft of information before you can start making true recommendations. So they can form part of it, but not everything. So yeah, I guess the message is always the same, really. Work with reputable suppliers, work with people that've got experience, maybe some qualification in this area if you really want to get to an efficient and effective way of fertilizer use. The aim is always the same though, Chris. Minimum input, maximum output, and make sure we're matching the growth response to what's needed by the turf manager.
Brill. Cheers, Phil.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah. It was perfect. Spot on. You are well versed in that talk. You can you can tell there you reeled that off quickly. And I was impressed on the timing there for you, Phil. I thought that was quite good. Brill. So I'm just going to summarise, kind of looking at the growing, just managing it. We've kind of discussed this already, so I don't really want to go into this in too much detail. But like you say, Richard, watering goal mouths. Once you've done all this, you've got the fertiliser, you put it on. Trying to allow your grass to reach a suitable height till you mow it. Don't just go back on it. I'm also conscious of time as well because we've only got 5 minutes. So yeah, I'll just kind of skirt around that slide, and then we'll move on to weed control. Again, I'm just going to kind of skirt around this, and if you want to have a read, I'll send the slides through so you can have a read because we're not going to get time to discuss these in great detail. But broad spectrum herbicides, there's a range of different ones that you can use. I know that everybody can't use them. Some sites are restricted in use in terms of what they can do. So you're looking more at them cultural practices that we've discussed, such as scarification, mowing being a key one, and also, potentially aerating, fertilizer inputs, etc., managing everything if you can do that. But yeah, I know you sell a range of products in terms of weed control, don't you, Phil, and what they can offer. You've not just got one.
No, and the most important thing is, as an industry, we use as minimum as is required. And dare say that if the first thing should be, can we hand weed? I know it's a bit of a task, but if there's just one area with some daisies around in the corner, do we need to go and blanket spray the whole pitch? I would suggest no. That would be the responsible way to approach it. But if it is a widespread problem and it does require treatment, make sure we're using approved herbicides for turf. There will be other versions for other markets, whether it's agriculture or something like that, but make sure you're using a turf approved one. That makes it legal. If you're applying it yourself, you should have the qualifications for that job. If you don't work with a reputable contractor like Richard, to make sure you stay safe, you stay legal. We've all got a responsibility, not just to ourselves, but the wider public and the wider environment. And what you would find over the years that these products have become safer and safer and safer, that the amount of active ingredient now that are in these products is way less than it used to be. that the regulation has taken us in a safe direction. So they are still effective, but it takes, it's professionals, qualified people to apply these. And people like Richard, I'm sure, can assist in selecting the right products for your weeds. Because what I would say going forward on selective weed killers is they are not the silver bullet. They've all got the strength and they've got the limitations. Some will be great on plantains, for example. Some will be great on daisies. So if you've got a field full of plantains and you use one that's really good on daisies, you'll be a bit disappointed in your phone. You can't say it's not worked at. It's just we picked the wrong product. 10 years ago, they were so broad that it would have wiped everything out. Now we've got to be more selective. And that's where working with reputable suppliers, reputable contractors can really pay dividends.
Capture them at the right time in the growth cycle, when they're not resistant.
Yeah.
Plantains, again, you let them mature. They're tough to shift now with the products available. Do work.
Yeah, my colleague actually calls them the Glaswegians of the weed world. They are tough. If you let them mature, they get tough. And it requires multiple applications down the line rather than one early in spring when they're a bit more susceptible. Spot on, Richard.
Something might be worth saying, Chris, if your budgets are tight, and you can't afford, say, a couple of granular applications of fertilizer, we tend to sort of stretch the customers' budgets out, put in a liquid feed with the weed killer. So maybe one granular, and then put a liquid in with the feed. If it's compatible, and you kill two birds with one stone, you got two feeds.
Absolutely.
Stretching your budget out.
Absolutely. I think to say that we only planned that yesterday, and it won't really, and we haven't rehearsed, I think to get that down to an hour and 28 minutes is pretty impressive. To say that we went through quite a few slides there and went on a bit of a journey and digressed quite a lot, but I'd like to massively thank Phil from ICL and Richard for joining me to help me get through that, because I'm conscious that me talking for an hour and a half sometimes gets a little bit tedious when I'm just talking at slides. It's nice to have other people join me and kind of input in the conversation just for a different voice, really. So no, thank you very much both for your time and giving up your evening to help me get through this and present it. It's been good having you both. And I suppose if you guys want to leave your contact details in the chat, if anyone wants to contact you, then feel free to do so. But I suppose, is there any questions? Leon, are you there? Are you not falling asleep?
Not at all.
Still
not
awake?
at all. I'll echo this. It's very nice not to just listen to yourself. So I've been with you all day as well.
Cheers,
So yeah, thanks for that, Phil and Richard. No, always want to hear from you, Chris. There's not been loads. I think a few are coming in now. I know we've covered quite a lot, so we might be going back a little bit compared to what we finished on. So apologies about that. But there was one in the Q&A from Stephen very early doors. Which type of mowers are preferred, cylinder or rotary? What are your views on rolling pitches? Does the compact of the pitches prevent good drainage? So sort of three-part question there, if you don't mind.
So in terms of funding through the Football Foundation, they will not fund cylinder mowers.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to be cutting 2 or 3 times a week, then cylinder mowers can be worth an investment. But if you're just going to be cutting, the quality of cut on a cylinder mower is obviously better.
Yeah.
But that's if you're providing an elite surface. I would not expect to see cylinder mowers, unless you're maybe cricket, balls, or the top end of football. Obviously, it does have benefits if you're doing it regularly, but it also has to come with the investment to get the results that you're wanting to see.
So, views on rolling pitches? I think we still see them knocking around at sites when we're out and about, don't we? I know there's different views on them, but yeah, any thoughts?
I think Phil's side-eye said that all.
No, yeah. Only because I've made all those mistakes in years gone by that you kind of feel the pressure of getting a stripe on the pitch, make it look presentable for the game. Yeah. It's like short-term wins for medium, long-term pain is how I sit on that one.
Yeah. I think rolling along with another practice. So obviously, if you've got light rollers on a mower, you've got rollers on a vertidrain, for example, which is a really heavy piece of kit that is doing 2 jobs at once. Absolutely, but not with a heavy concrete roller. I would not recommend that at all. It's just going to cause you more problems that somebody like Richard's going to have to go and undo.
Richard, you hit the nail on the head earlier, and I really picked up on it, that sometimes the hardest thing, but the best thing to do in those winter months is to do nothing, to keep off it. And I do wonder sometimes how much rolling goes on just to restore the levels, just to put a bit of a stripe on it. How damaging that can be by destroying that topping. The infiltration rates drop, it becomes wet, and it's just a self-compounding issue down the line. So for me, rolling, it's on the side of caution, definitely.
Anything else?
So I don't know, yeah. There's a few more. So there's another one from a different Steve. Given all the rain we've had, I try to use the Maxi Slater and Quadruple A weekly. When I can, without destroying the pitch surface. Is this too much? Is it impacting the grass health, or is this okay?
In terms of just using it in general during the playing season?
I guess using it weekly with the amount of rain that we've had.
Yeah, I would try, as Phil just said, sometimes it's better to stay off. And the thing is, you're not going to get any recovery. If you're raking heavily, you're going over that surface and you're being a bit aggressive, you're just going to pull out the grass. If you are using it, it's using the right implements. So, for example, using the slitter, if you can get on and you're not making, any mess from driving around, dragging soil around, etc., worm casts and everything else that can stick to it, then yeah, absolutely. But I would be conscious of using things like spring tines and the brush heavily during that winter period when it's too wet. And as we've kind of discussed, stay off it as best you can. Sometimes better to let nature take its course.
Anything to add there, Phil, Richard? Chris?
Yeah, less is more when the ground conditions are poor. What are we achieving? Nothing. That's just compaction from the tractor. That's all. Just adding problems.
I kind of think it's if you grass effectively when grass is wet and it becomes anaerobic and the surface becomes that situation. I kind of think it's injured, isn't it? Effectively, it's not in its ideal environment. It's like if you broke your leg, would you go running? You wouldn't, would you? You kind of let yourself get better, and then you go out, and once you're feeling fit, you go. It's the same as a playing surface. Let it get back to, its perfect environment, and then it's good to go again.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a weird analogy there, to be honest with you.
No, it works. I got what you mean. So moving on to a few questions around the sand that you touched on earlier. One from Ryan. I've chatted with a few people at pitches that they've had not cancelled throughout the winter over wet periods. They all have sand heavily incorporated. Is what you're saying that those pitches? I think it's trying to say is sand sort of a good answer to that. I think you touched on earlier. Is sand the way forward? They've all had sand heavily incorporated. Is what you're saying that this can help those pitches temporarily, but not long term for the good of the soil? So can it have a worst case further on down the course?
I suppose it depends what sand's being applied, but.
Yeah, no, I think the message that we were trying to get through was that sand can definitely have benefits in sports turf. It will increase infiltration rates. It will be that's why modern day pitches are all built out of sand, 90, 10, or even 100% sand. That's the benefit you get with it. What we don't want to do is give that recommendation, I suppose, or the expectation you won't put 30 ton over a pitch and that drainage problem goes away. That you meant, and I can see the comment there that's heavily incorporated. That may be why they're seeing the benefits. They've decided to embark on a heavy sand top dressing approach, and so, do you know what? The cost we can justify at our club, and we'll get the long-term benefit. No, I don't want people to think that by applying sand, it's a short-term gain for a long-term issue. That might not be the case, but I don't want people to think if we spend £3,000 on sand, that's better than spending £3,000 on pipe drainage in the corner, like Richard was saying before. Just setting expectations right here.
Yeah.
Perfect. Another one on sand, just from Steve. For a clay-based pitch, so heavily clay-based pitch, what category of sand should we consider? I think you touched on that earlier.
Yeah, kind of. You want maybe like a medium coarse sand, and that's typically what you would expect for a clay-based pitch.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. And then I think the last one we've got in here, Bart, a load of thank yous and great information, which is always great to see those comments in the end. Soluble and liquid feed is significantly cheaper than granular. Is it better to have one application of granular, which lasts 6 months, or an application of liquid every month for 6 months, as both cost roughly the same?
So, really good question. And what I would say is that you can achieve great results by using soluble and liquid feed. We make them, sell them. And the challenge I would think at grassroots level is that applying every month without your own spray, it's time heavy. The cost may be the same over that period of the products. I still think a granular should be cheaper, but the cost can be going out every month, and then you've got weather conditions. Far easier, I would say, to feed and forget. You put one down, you get 6 months out of it, you don't have to worry about your feed again. But that's not to say you couldn't go down the soluble feed and still get great results. You can. I'm just trying to give the most efficient and the most responsible advice, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'd agree with Phil on that. I'd agree with Phil on that.
I'm on the right path. Richard agrees with me, that's good.
I'm sort of losing connection here a little bit, so if you can hear me, from point of view, one particular fertilizer would be cheaper than many liquids.
Sorry,
I think we've lost.
I put my thumbs up to say everything was right, and just to put my thumb up, it all started going cracker. That was my fault.
Yeah.
Go for it, Leon. Is there anything else?
So just going back to the Q&A, that's the joys of having a chat function and a Q&A. There's different routes to pop questions in. There's a few in there. Just one from Dave. Do you guys value/recommend periodic applications, so spraying of iron and or seaweed liquids?
Should I take that one?
Yeah, go for it, Phil.
So iron, interesting one. So iron is typically applied for colour response, maybe a bit of disease management and moss control. Now, as a fertiliser, what we're saying is we're applying it from a nutrient point of view. I don't think any of our plants will be iron deficient. Okay, but you may find times through the year for a bit of presentation or a bit of disease management, iron would be helpful. Seaweed is a biostimulant by its nature to help with stress tolerance. So if budgets allow, you may want to, sorry, it's just making me laugh. Richard's frozen in a really happy state. But seaweed biostimulant, improve routine, improve drought tolerance. I've got to be responsible and say, look, when budgets are tight, would I be embarking on a few £100 on a seaweed as opposed to maybe another couple of bags of seed to oversee my goldmouth through autumn and winter to restore? You may get more value in that approach of putting overseed in your high wear areas. But hey, look, speak to your suppliers. If you like seaweed and it makes you feel better and you think you might give you some root development, it's one of those things, no harm, no foul. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to cause any problems. But what I would say, don't expect it to transform your pitch.
Thanks for that, Phil.
Cheers, Phil.
Great answer. And then last one, unless any others come in, or if I've missed any, guys, please shout up. One from Jason, quite a broad one, but I think quite a really important one. So I imagine lots have a similar situation. So I think it's a one-man band sort of doing their site, 6 full-size pitches, as well as managing sort of 1,500 student school. And so probably a lot of usage on those 6 pitches. They have sort of external contractors for cutting and marking, but I think the wider works is done in-house. What would you guys prioritize in Jason's case, which I imagine a lot of schools or club sites are one-person bands and trying to do stuff on a stretch budget as well?
I would say, I'm going to let Phil have an input here, but I would say to prioritise overseeding, because at a school that's getting a lot of use, it's going to need, I would say, overseeding because it's going to get a lot of wear. And I would also suggest some form of aeration or decompaction alongside that. I would say that's where, if you can, an application of fertilizer to coincide with your seed. And then if you can, a bit of weed control. that's kind of the direction that I would go in. I'm not sure what your thoughts are, Phil.
Yeah, it's always tricky, is it, without knowing the site, seeing the site, and knowing the thing. But I would generally aeration is going to be a friend. If you, I don't know, again, I don't. If it was me, I'd love to hear that it's getting slitted every week or fortnight through winter. You know, when ground conditions allow, because I would imagine at a site like that, its playability through winter is the biggest challenge, and keeping air in there and keeping water moving through that profile is probably that would be my key focus. But like Chris says, yeah, restoring quality at a time of low use to build resilience going into the period of heavy use, that should be a priority as well. But aerate, I would suggest.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Real.
I think we have lost Richard, unfortunately, whether he jumps back on or not, but it's fine. Lots more thank yous coming in, which is great. Anything else to add from your side, Chris?
Nothing from that side. I'm all good. I can go and watch the rest of the Premier League darts.
Don't know if
Not that I
we-
wanted to leave you all, but it's,
Australia.
you are
I'm
all
happy to
right.
stay on for another hour if anyone wants to stick around.
Yeah,
Sound.
I'd fancy an early night if that was the case.
It's a good idea.
Is it?
Well, just from my side, thank you very much for inviting me, Chris, and I've really enjoyed that, and hopefully people have got some value out of it from my side.
Yeah,
No, massive thank you
very
from
much
us,
for
Phil.
coming.
Massive thank you for Richard, even though he's dropped off. But yeah, we will, as always, we'll share the slides and the recording afterwards. Phil, if you're happy for me to share your email as well, that'd be great. I'll make sure that's confirmed with Richard as well, and we'll go from there. Any other questions, guys? You know, we're at this is the last one of this season. We'll be looking at sort of prepping them for next season. It's my last one. It's also potentially Chris's last one, I think, because we're both slightly moving on into different organisations. But yeah, we really enjoyed these. It's fantastic. We're still getting the interaction. I know there's other ones happening across the country, so I think these will definitely look to continue. I know the GMA are eager to continue them as well, aren't they, Chris? So,
Yes.
But yeah, we'll get everything shared out. Anything to add?
Not really. No. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and hope you've enjoyed it. And hopefully see you soon.
Perfect. Enjoy your evening, everyone.
Thanks, Bob.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.